she was asked to write this book, and her and I were sharing a lot of content, and I'm giving you the turbo version, but she said she wouldn't write it without me, and so I wouldn't be here without that. And I'm happy. The book has done very well. It is a little bit of fiction, Nancy. It is the fastest selling book in ISTE history. It is not quite yet, but it is rapidly approaching the most sold. So some of those folks have a little time, and I'm guessing, Liz, your opening keynote probably has sold more books than we have. So I want to be clear. The reality is we have a heavy backpack, and we have to decide, well, what are we going to do in this future with all those things that I just let out for you? And so that's where I draw in this forced perspective. I'm not a professional photographer, but I have grown to really appreciate photography. And to be honest with you, it started with the iPhone, because I had it in my pocket. I had it around me all the time, and I was interested in capturing my life, my children's life, my friends' experiences, because we can always go back to them, and they remind us of things. And so as I've grown as a photographer, perspective has always been a big issue. I used to talk about perspective not from a video thing, but more perspectives from history, from psychology and all that. And so the more and more I've kind of studied this, I began to say and look at these components are what is now happening in our digital media. And so I kind of want to go through that really, really quickly with you. The first thing is in any kind of components of perspectives, there's this top layer, which is what it's at our eye level. That is the canvas. That's the big piece. That's the part that we have all media from. And so what I mean by that is everything that we see, and I only have a small list here, these are all pieces of media. Sometimes we think it only comes from a digital set, but it comes from all kinds of different places. We've been being bombarded for this picture plane for a long time, but again, as I showed you in previous slides, it's all kind of coming to a head, like we're getting more than ever, which leads us to then this horizon line, which is the horizon of the picture. On top is that picture plane. For us, or for me, a horizon is something that's kind of unclear. It's not quite there. Like this is on the horizon. It can be a beginning. It can be a sunrise and a sunset, but it's always kind of far, far away. And that leads to something like this, which is actually Da Vinci played with. And it's one of the reasons why the Mona Lisa is so famous. And that is his art of what's called fumato, which translates to soft, vague, and blur that I put there. But it really translates into hazy, kind of smoky area, which is what that horizon is for us. The third component of that perspective piece is the ground line. And the ground line is something that's tangible, something you can put your feet on. It's bound by gravity. I know, like if I said to you, would perspective change if we didn't have gravity, like if you were in space? And I think all of you would say absolutely it would change. You can touch it. It is plain sight. It leads to something. But it also gives you kind of this line between what is past and what is present. And this, for most of us in this, from based on what I've seen, I'm making a huge assumption here, but for most of us who are at the teaching age, except for some of the new folks coming in, this was the perspective. This was that ground line. Whether that's FDR, which is probably our grandparents and parents. There's the radio fireside chat, but there's a person like Walter Cronkite or Brokaw or Jennings or all those, and that's where those perspectives came from, and that's what oftentimes dictated the viewpoint. And the viewpoint is what is right at your eye level. It's what you see all the time. It's designed for your focus. It's designed to have you focus there. And as you change that plane, as you move people along it, it changes the scale of the picture, and it blurs lines, creates biases, manipulates all kinds of things. And what we've lived through most recently, and that's what's changed, is what they used to call the firewall. And when I'm speaking of this, I'm not speaking of the IT data privacy, any of those kinds of things. I'm actually speaking from the news industry. It used to be that there were two segments. One segment on one side was the news, the folks that told the news, and that was what they were supposed to report. Here's the story. They had storylines. They tried to capture you and draw you in, but they weren't supposed to be focused on the money. On the other side was the actual advertising. So we had to get sales. We had to help pay for those reporters and all that. As we made the decision to no longer pay for our media, this firewall began to shrink. And so now what we're finding, along with not only just news going away and moving into different mediums, is they're now using some of the same techniques in your advertising as they used to use for our real news. And I wrote down a bunch of things here. This isn't even half of all of those types of things, but this is what is being manipulated into this funnel right into our viewpoints that is tapping into all kinds of different things that are pushing us in a bunch of different directions. And this is an example of me taking that viewpoint and switching it. It isn't always down the middle. Sometimes you can move it. And any of you have learned the rule of thirds, you can manipulate the eye based on where you put people. We are now able to do that with digital media. It's also, if you've ever listened to the song The Hook by the Blues Travelers, you should spend some time listening to the lyrics. It will probably frustrate you a lot if you actually read into what those are. They were manipulating or forcing perspective in that song. Here's a picture from the Texas Book Depository. The outside is not. That's a forced perspective picture. If you look at the one in the middle, this is actually on the outside of the building I was able to visit this summer, and notice what someone did or several people did with forcing your perspective into a particular way. Some people would call that conspiracy theory. Some people call it the truth. We're doing that all the time with a lot of our science. Ever since the modern science movement, people have been manipulating those things, and it is impacting how it affects our culture. And then kind of last but not least, it's our tools. I tried to show you that earlier as we were going through the presentation. I was changing things. But what I wanted to do is show you this is a traditional picture of what we used to look like. When you take this picture and you take a couple, not this exact picture, but you take components of this same picture and you put it onto a small screen and you change the orient of the camera and the viewpoint, you get a very different story. And when this particular story came out in Instagram, and I also put up a Snapchat thing, people make rash and quick decisions like, oh my gosh, the lion is eating this young cub. But then when you go to the original picture of what it really looks like and you change that perspective, it's a whole different story nonetheless. And so I am really, really concerned about the fact that we are not teaching kids how to deal. We're just having them intake, and in this case, the Kool-Aid, and they don't know the difference between fact from fiction. So I want to look real quickly at who are the spectators in this particular perspective, because I think that's really you, myself, and then I want to talk about the children. So quickly, I would like to do a quiz for you. I'm hoping we can answer this into the chat section, and I'm going to give you 3 quick tests. Hopefully you're ready. Here's number 1.
Bright red, looks healthy and clear, everything looks good. This is from patient 0, the one that we treated yesterday. I haven't opened it yet. I'm going to get it out on some paper here and show you guys, but that doesn't look good to me. Something's not good about that blood. So stay tuned. Give me just a minute here and I'll go pull this out and see what it looks like. Okay, see how I can film this one hand. Here's a normal patient's blood. Typical. Here is patient 0. there's a clear difference there, folks. Stay tuned for part 3. I'm going to keep testing. And if you look at it, it's bright red, looks healthy and clear. Everything looks good. This is from patient 0.
All right, so number 1, fact or fiction? Is that real or fake?
Lots of fake, couple fiction, Darren, it looks like in the chat.
Oh, good. I was hoping you would tell me.
Okay. All right, several, yes. A couple people think it's fiction.
Okay.
Well, fiction, fact, yeah, fake. Yep, I think pretty much the consensus is everybody thinks it is not a fact.
Okay, let's go to number 2. Fact or fiction? What do you think, Nancy? What's the consistency?
Looks like we might be at maybe 75 fact, 25 fiction.
Okay.
Just kind of doing a quick. Yes, and somebody, Adrian points out during that time and era, definitely a fact. But I'd say we're about 75% fact and about 25% fiction.
Okay. And here we go. Number 3, the last part of the quiz.
Hey kid, would you like some drugs? The first one is free. Want to check out my van? I got some candy. Hey kid, want to join our gang and spray paint under a bridge?
No, bug off, man. I'm going roller skating. I want to be addicted to roller skating, not crap. Every roller skate today, he will go to college tomorrow. Prison is full of people that have never roller skated.
I'm Brad Armstrong, owner of Roller Kingdom in Reno, Nevada, keeping your kids off the streets since 1999.
I say no to drugs. I say no to games.
I say no to unplanned pregnancy.
I say no to meth. I say no to reefer. I say yes to roller skating.
Man, this roller kingdom is really pretty.
All right, I cut it off there. There, I can show you a little bit more, but fact or fiction? What do you think, Nance? All right. Hopefully you can still hear me. I cannot hear Nancy.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was saying about 50-50 fact versus
Okay.
Several people think it's a commercial or an ad.
Okay. Perfect. So let's go through it real quick. First things first, let's talk about number 1. Number 1 was maybe the coronavirus. Absolutely 100% fake. Person put it in there. We can get into all the information, but what I want you to notice is down in the bottom corner, when this originally came out, it had 13,000 views. And the person, the original person that put out the video, not this Kells person, but that's the one who published it. If you notice down at the bottom of that particular thing, you'll see that there's now, from the short amount of time between January 29th and January, no, that's my Twitter thing. Anyway, it bunches up between 9.1 million views. Even though the person came out and said that it's fake, then the person who actually published it doubles down and says, I knew it was fake too, but it doesn't really matter. And we all know the information that's been posted. In reality with all this, not to put things too far into perspective, but this coronavirus is obviously scary. There's been anywhere ranged between 910 people to 980 people that have died. But to put it into a little bit of perspective, in just the last year, this is how many people died of the flu. And so when we have pieces of media that are popped out that push things, it accelerates and exacerbates the perspective which people have. Doesn't mean it's not. I'm not trying to minimize it, but I'm saying we don't talk about the flu in the same way that we talk about some of these strange new things. Number two is absolutely correct. It was fact, but oftentimes you will see photos that have been doctored with words and those kinds of things. And then last but not least, and this one's the gray area, it's both fact and fiction. Rhett and Link actually published this video as a piece of satire propaganda kind of thing, but it went viral and it went crazy. And so the roller rink actually took it and doubled down, and it is on their website now, and they are using that as a piece of advertisement, even though it was all meant to be fiction. So the type of spectators that we have really changed. And the question is for you, and what I want to really bring out at the close of this is, are you going to be an active participant, or are you going to be a passive participant in how we help kids navigate these things? The part that I am most concerned about is our kids are watching, and they are paying attention not only to how we navigate it, but how we help them get through these kinds of difficulties. And it seems like a giant mountain. But one of the things I've noticed, and I actually took these in two different schools, is our answer to media literacy is let's ban phones. Let's keep these distractions away, even though we know kids are spending most of their time using them. Our answer to this is let's continue to decline social studies, which is actually many of the ways in which we discuss psychology and sociology and media literacy and make connections between literacy and math. We need to help them gain their own perspective. And in doing that, I want to give you 3 quick ways to do that. This is going to be, because of the time of this presentation, it's going to be things that's really homework for you to go check out. But I want to offer you at least 3 things that you can do tomorrow that can help your students navigate this. One of the first things has to do with a thing called lateral reading. It comes from both Sheg and Mike Caulfield. And the idea is that for all of us, when we used to purchase People magazine, we knew we were getting gossip. When we would purchase the Oregonian, which was the newspaper, we knew what kind of backgrounds those reporters were coming from. We knew what we were getting into. When you warp into a digital platform, you typically have absolutely no background unless it comes from a friend that you hope vetted it and you trust, or another source. And that is very, very different than the media that we used to grow up in. So what I want to challenge you to do next is, within the next week, is look at there's all kinds of resources online that you can find about a concept called lateral reading. And the idea is that you don't just read an article and you take it for fact. You open up very, very many tabs. You do lots of research, and you begin to siphon through information as if it's not just the gospel. And you need to find not just the links of who did it and where is it going, but then look at these. There's some examples of other places that you can go. And the more resources that you can find that can say that this is legit, these people are correct, it hasn't been manipulated, the easier it is for you to begin to fact check and believe the information that you're getting. Another way to do that is an example of something from Oak Grove Unified School District. They have a thing called ART. You could build your own community one. There's all kinds of different ones out there to help you laterally read when you look at information. Number 2, for those younger kids, what you can do is just simply begin to immerse them with words. And this is an example of some of the words that you can pull out. There's all kinds of different words. Some of them you'll look at and you'll have no idea what they even mean. Just by having them look at these particular words, go to something like news.google.com, type this word in, and do some reading on a bunch of different sources about what is rage bait, how can it do. That alone can start to begin to get them to look at things and the media differently than they have before. And then finally, I would encourage you to create scenarios in your classrooms or with your peers that drive truth detectives. And what I mean by that is give them something that you know is either real or fake, but it looks sketchy. For example, the roller video, and you have them dissect it. You have them go through the stages of how does a detective find things out with for example, the who, what, where, why, when, how. And there's a lot of different pieces of information out there that can help you do that. Including this particular thing, and that is would be the book that I mentioned. Jennifer and I have put a lot of different things in there that we hope will help you. I have ran over my time, and with this last 20 seconds, what I want to do is I don't want to leave you hanging from my story in Wallowa Lake. And what I want to tell you is that all of that stuff ended up happening, and while it was going out, that this lake was poisoned and needed to be changed and all that. And meanwhile, my wife, actually, who's a nurse, works with someone who has been in the Wallowa community for her entire time. They have many houses there. And she was actually giggling and telling the story to my wife that her father was one of many people that actually put those barrels down there. And those barrels were filled with sand. Yet we had built this massive hysteria that had gotten all the way to Russia and Australia. And here's a picture of them actually taking the drums out. They had put them in other drums and they were cleaning it. And you need to know that headlines have since come out that people were crying and saying that this was an issue, but it just got out of control. It went viral, and it's affected all kinds of things, from economics, from people, even to the person that published it in themselves. They decided that they may never report something like this again because they've had both complaints and death threats. People are being forced through the information that we're getting. Kids have no basis for their background and how they can navigate it. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't seen this book by Lizzie Boyd called Flashlight, there's all kinds of things going on at night. The nocturnal animals, there's changes, there's things, and we have those same things in the digital landscape. We need teachers like you, we need administrators like you, we need IT folks like you to help our kids navigate this just crazy landscape that we have. I know I went over, I know I turboed on some things, I apologize for that, but if I can ever help you both from a physical standpoint come out and work with you and your staffs, I would be happy to do that. If you have questions, I know we're going to have some here at the end. You can feel free to email me. You can find me on Twitter. And then I occasionally write a newsletter for different things. And I just want to apologize for going over because I know that destroyed some of your question time. But I appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
No, Darren, I think they were riveted. I think we could have gone on for, we needed an hour and a half or so for this session, which I know is hard for a virtual session, but we just want to thank you. And Darren, I'm curious do you have a couple, I was trying to find the lateral read, but I know you have some great resources. I know you also have the great Common Sense Media poster. Do you want to put that into the chat as we're?
Yep, absolutely can do that.
If you have those easily, off on hand kind of quickly. And we also want to put your contact information in the chat. So I know your contact information is quick in your newsletter, if you want to throw that in the chat so that people can click on that. So let's do that. And then the lateral reading. Or any of those resources. The investigator, I love that one. Darren does a great workshop that I've seen him do on the investigator. I actually just saw him last week do it on the creating the investigation and taking some good kind of like he said, having your students become those investigators and teaching them the skills of lateral reading, or teaching them some of those skills on how do we figure out if these things are actually, real or not. And I think that that's a great resource. So yes, there's Darren's email. Anybody have any questions for Darren?
I am working on getting those resources that you requested.
Thanks, Darren.
Yep.
Yes. Darren, several people are saying cascading the knowledge is key to PD, so thank you. It was great. You kind of left at the beginning, had that, got us interested in the area, and then gave us that at the end. That was great. Anyone have any questions? Oh, okay, there is the bit.do lat read is a resource in there. Anyone have any questions? And you're more than welcome to type it in, or if you want to unmute yourself. Looks like Darren's also put in there the ML word web, the word web for younger students that he talked about. Brian is asking a great question. Darren, what are your thoughts on how we can change the message as we move from elementary school to high school? And any thoughts there on what things maybe we teach elementary school students versus obviously high school students have a lot more to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about the truth detective, because even young kids can understand that. Like we want to tell the truth. We want to get to the bottom of things. We don't want to spread rumors. What does it feel like on the playground when kids say things about you that are untrue? How does it affect you? What goes on? I skipped over a whole part about, I think there is a huge social emotional component to this. In talking about self-management and self-awareness and social awareness, you can easily mold in pieces of media literacy. It can't get to the level, but they can begin to understand that they are being molded by all kinds of different things. And again, we typically start with words to kind of, and then physically that word map that I shared, that's a couple of different ways. I know there's a lot of resources both with in Common Sense, the News Literacy Project. There's also a thing called Checkology, which comes from them. I would highly recommend that. There's different resources in a bunch of places.
Great, thank you, Darren. We really appreciate it. Somebody asked, oh, how is web reading a bit more like teleportation? Like you had I think the analogy on your screen. Yeah, what was your analogy there?
Yeah, that actually comes from Mike Caulfield, and there's a it's escaping me what he calls it, and I would highly recommend you look it up. It's free. It's called Web Literacy for Student Fact Checkers, by Michael Caulfield, Caulfield. And what he really talks a lot about is that in today's media, when we get something on our phones, or we get something in media and we just click on it, we're being teleported somewhere. We don't know where that is. So is this a troll? Is this a bot? Is this a real person? Is this somebody of trustworthiness? Where do they get their links from? Where do they get the information from? How was the media made? I mean, like, you just go on and on. Whereas when before this time, we would get information from sources that we chose, whether it was like through subscription, or I paid for it, or it was vetted through, I'm not saying that there wasn't hoax and fake things that came through those vehicles, but we had more context, is maybe a better way to say that. And so the teleportation is you're just warped into that, and we have nothing, there's no background there.
All right, great, thank you. You know, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up things. Darren put his email address in there, and I know he'd love to stay in touch. His newsletter is also a great way to stay in touch and to kind of continue to learn more about some of this work. He will also be at NC Ties, so anyone going to be at our North Carolina Technology and Education Conference, he will be there. I just want to thank you. Please, if you will give Darren some feedback, if you go to that go.ncsu.edu Learn for All 2020, which is this, takes you here, there, and I described a screenshot, but there is a place under each presenter to provide feedback. That feedback goes directly to the presenter, and I know it's great for them to get that and to hear that feedback. They took their time to present for free for us, and we really appreciate them doing that. So if you want to give them feedback, you can go to that Go link and scroll down to the bottom where Darren is and give him that feedback. There are also a couple of other things. A lot of you have asked for professional learning hours. You want a certificate for attending sessions. We will be sending out an email with a link to a conference evaluation that gives us just 3 questions that it helps us to evaluate the overall conference and some of this some of that information. So different than the feedback for Darren, but the gives us some good information because this is our first year of doing this. Michigan Virtual and Liz Kolb kind of had started this several years ago and handed this to us. So we want to get some feedback. In order to get the certificate, you have to fill out the evaluation form. And you must complete that evaluation form by February 26th. If you do not fill it out by February 26th, then you will not receive your certificate. The certificates will be, we'll run that autocrat and you'll get it via email by March 1st. If you missed anything or you want to share this recording or other recordings, we will have them up within the next couple of days and you will be able to find them back on this page there. You might also want to know other opportunities from the Friday Institute. We have an upcoming MOOC on social emotional learning that starts the 17th of February, as well as our newsletter. So stay up to date with the things that are happening. We love to go out and work with schools and districts, both here in North Carolina, but also around the country. I saw one of our Utah partners, I think Danny was on the session. So we work in a lot of places and all around, and Darren and I sometimes get to do some great work together too. So stay up to date with us, the PLLC newsletter, and you have Darren's contact information as well. With that, we are finished. Thank you for attending the Learning for All conference. It has been wonderful. And oh, somebody asked, will we have an email to do the post-conference survey? Yes, we will be sending out an email. If you registered for the conference, you will get an email that's auto-generated to you. If you did not register for the conference, we will post it at the top of that session, the conference schedule. So we will post it there, but if you registered through the Eventbrite, you will get that as an email. All right. Yes, several of the videos are already up. We have been posting those as we as they are going. So they will be there. We hope you'll share and stay connected with us. Thank you again to Darren. A huge round of applause.
Thank you.
We appreciate you sharing with us today and definitely getting us thinking on this Monday afternoon, evening. Have a great week, everybody, and we look forward to connecting soon.